how does someone become better in storytelling? What kind of use cases were you solving for?
When you have to teach X, you have to learn 10X. Every dollar or rupee you can save matters.
How do you focus on end users' needs while applying data science?
Both of these need to go hand in hand, otherwise you're not going to achieve the end impact that you want to have.
Data science has also evolved with time.
First of all, in life, learning is very important at every stage, whether you're a 5-year-old or a 50-year-old.
When things come to the practical implementation, then there's a difference.
Right decisions made at key points in life, it has always been through right mentorship.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Decode Stories, where we explore the past, discuss the present and prepare for the future with leaders. In today's episode, we are excited to introduce a leader in the data science field. As the Vice President of Data Science at Swiggy, she has been instrumental in changing the way we think about marketplace fulfillment, delivery optimization and customer experience. Her influence extends beyond her corporate achievements, and as a part of the CXXO champion, she is at the forefront of empowering women in the startup ecosystem. Let's welcome Goda Ramkumar. Hi Goda, how are you feeling today?
Great. It's a Saturday morning, so feeling great.
And you're looking absolutely gorgeous.
Hey, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So Goda, thank you so much for joining us today. Okay. And while I was going through your profile, right, we had spoken in the past as well, but while I was going through your profile, there were a couple of really interesting things that caught my attention. And one of them is that you were a faculty member at IIM Calcutta. And the second one is that you're a part of the CXXO champion. So can you please tell us more about these?
Okay. So throughout my career, I've been in the field of data science. And after a point, I felt like you need some avenues to give it back for the next generation. Right. So at that point, when the opportunity came to be a visiting faculty, especially bringing the business aspect to students. Like a lot of times at campuses, you learn a lot of theory without knowing where and how to apply it. So I think somebody coming from the industry and opening up that part really made sense. So that's when the opportunity at IMC came up and I took it up and really enjoyed it.
That's nice.
They say when you have to teach something, let's say when you have to teach X, you have to learn 10X to be able to teach. So I did learn a lot during that. CXXO is more of, it's an initiative for female entrepreneurs from Kalari, where you have champions from different areas who get an opportunity to interact with founders, maybe guide in whichever area of expertise you come from. So that was an opportunity to meet very bright young women who are setting up companies, and that journey is something I haven't been through, and I really have a lot of respect for people who start a company.
Okay.
So that I would say has opened my eyes to, many challenges that come across which you don't realize while working in a company. Very enriching experience it has been.
Okay. And I think you would also get to meet a lot of people coming from a diverse backgrounds, right? What exactly excites them to actually start their entrepreneurial journeys, right?
Very different domains that I hadn't been exposed to. So very enriching.
That's great. And Goda, you have been completely submerged in the data science, since the days when it was not even termed data science, right? So how has the journey been for you along with data science over the past 17 years?
I think it started off, actually, I don't know if many people know this. My undergraduate degree was actually in biotechnology.
Okay.
So I did a lot of internships in bio labs, helping with drug discoveries.
Okay.
But there was some inherent thing within me where I wanted to see impact faster, right? And probably I was not cut out for that very well because it's a job of a lot of patience and, you need to be meticulous in the lab and not drop things, which I'm very bad at. So a professor who used to teach operations research at IIT Madras, I'm still in touch with him.
Okay.
G. Srinivasan, I look up to him as my mentor. So he introduced me to this field of operations research and optimization, which is when I realized all the math that you learn in school and you used to wonder where will I apply it in life. It kind of started making sense as to how you can have impact through it.
Okay.
And that's what started my interest in this field. And then I kind of decided that's where, I want to spend rest of my time with. And then things were very organic. I took up my first job in an operations research team at Sabre. It was in the field of airlines, pricing, revenue management, very interesting field. I spent almost 10 years
Yeah.
in my first company, which is a rare thing.
Yeah.
But from there, by that time, I think that field slowly transformed into more machine learning,
Okay.
working with big data, and that's what became data science. At that point, data science was not even a term when I started off. So I kept learning with time as the field changed, and I think it's changing even more rapidly now, and that journey just continues, I guess.
Okay.
So I spent 10 years in my very first company, which is a little rare in these situations. People keep shifting every 2-3 years nowadays. But at the end of 10 years, I think I kind of hit that stage where I felt, I might be getting into that comfort zone a little bit. And from air transportation, I almost crash landed to ground transportation at Ola. So, but I would say I spent 2 years at Ola. In those 2 years, probably I learned as much as maybe 5 years put together. So initially I was working with Ola Share as a business supporting all the pricing and dispatch algorithms for Ola Share, and then moved to Ola Marketplace, which is the entire cab, other parts of the cab business. Met a few wonderful people at Ola, very bright, both young minds as well as leaders. And I ended up joining one of the leaders post that who started off his own venture along with Binny Bansal, X to 10X. X to 10X was a very different opportunity compared to the others because it was a role where I would get to interact with multiple startups in this ecosystem. And that was the phase when we had startups trying to solve problems in, I think, diverse domains, like right from packaging to insurance to mobility. I think that breadth just was a huge opportunity to get exposed to. Met a lot of founders, tried establishing the initial part of the data science journey, and then realized the challenges that you face in making data science work at companies, and did a bunch of work there along with founders. Swiggy was one of the companies I was interacting with. Really loved the challenging problems that Swiggy was solving. And I think once COVID hit, when I was looking to take up something else, I think Swiggy's doors opened up, and I've been with Swiggy for the last 4 years. During COVID, I think Swiggy was a blessing because everything comes home.
Yes.
And it's a hyper-local convenience now expanding to groceries apart from food and all that. So the data science has a huge role to play right from the beginning when you open the app to the point the order reaches you. So pretty diverse problem. So I have been enjoying my stint at Swiggy there.
Okay. So, Gordon, in fact, Swiggy is one of those, I would say, products that, most of the Indians, we have been using it, right, in our daily lives, whenever we need something, whether it's 2 a.m. in the night or it's 10 a.m. in the morning, right? So, we generally just simply go to Swiggy, whether it's food or whether it's, some other, things, let's say using Ginny or Instamart, right? Any such, I want to understand that how Swiggy is solving this problem in a country like India, because let's say, if you, whenever we look at the maps, right, when you put some address, there might be some cases when, you are actually being directed to the right address, right? But in other cases, it might be showing some other way, or maybe it is not able to detect it on the map. Whereas my experience, let's say, if you look at other countries, right, if I put an address over there, then, I will be directed to to that particular location. So how are you solving this problem?
So I think definitely, though the domain is very similar across countries of delivery and hyperlocal convenience, there are certain India-specific problems. I think Swiggy as well as other companies in India have been solving very well. One of the key problems is the address accuracy part, right? So only in India, I think we hear behind Ganesha temple showing up in the address. So there are 2-3 aspects. First of all, investing in the right data strategy of collecting India's specific map data, because we have delivery executives delivering day in and day out every day to different points and saying, I delivered here. So there's a lot of data that you have to work on to build signals to say these addresses are accurate, these are inaccurate, and we need to collect the right addresses here. Which are the points of interest, like which is a tech park, which is an apartment society, which are the entry gates so that you can also guide the delivery partner to reach at the right gate. Every minute of delivery partners wasted is not only hurts the customer experience as well as the efficiency for the platform. So bunch of interesting problems to solve in the location intelligence area itself. That said, in the Indian ecosystem, it needs a very good on-ground understanding of what works and does not work for delivery partners and even restaurant partners. How do you set up those dark stores and, is it in the first floor, ground floor? All of these kind of matter in terms of how long you take in that last mile once you reach the place to deliver it, So at least like my team works on a bunch of problems in location intelligence, collecting the right signals, but also focus on going on ground where we do deliveries ourselves and experience the life of delivery partner, experience the life of somebody who's running a pot store so that we can solve the right problems for that end user. Right? If you yourself struggle finding an address is when you know the pain of and impact of the work you're doing as well.
So Goda, you mentioned about, your first company, you were there for 10 years, right? And you were working in the aviation industry. I am actually, pretty intrigued by, how were you using data science over there? What kind of use cases were you solving for?
So I think airline industry is one of the oldest ones. So we started applying maybe math optimization very early on, right? I would say it's ahead of other industries that way. Sabre being a B2B setup, right? Because you are solving problem for the airlines and airlines are solving the problems for the end passenger. So kind of products we were building, the end user was the person or the airline executive who's handling this, trying to build schedules for the aircraft, like when should you fly from point A to point B? How do you price? And how does that price vary day over day as you approach the departure date, right? How do you manage the inventory of seats you have? And it's also a very costly business to run. So every dollar or rupee you can save matters a lot in terms of the revenue management. And of course, disruptions happen, like the network breaks due to weather, due to strikes, a lot of disruptions that happen. How do you recover from it? And how do you help the passengers who are stuck on in the airports, and how do you reroute flights? So bunch of optimization and forecasting problems that you need to solve to make this work for the airlines. And each airline is different. Like if you take a very big airline who runs a network carrier like an Emirates or Etihad, they have a different set of problems to solve compared to low-cost carriers who are flying point to point and trying to run a very lean business. Different problems to solve for based on the cohort of the airlines.
I think aviation is one such industry because currently the use cases which are around us, aviation is something that we don't generally put our mind to, right? We just simply book a flight and all. But I think it's good to understand, how, you were working there or the kind of problem statements that you were solving for at that time. Great. One more thing, Goda, you mentioned in the beginning, right, that you are still in touch with your mentor. So I want to understand how important it is for someone to have a mentor.
I think first of all, in life, learning is very important at every stage, whether you're a 5-year-old or a 50-year-old, right? And I think having the right mentors for different areas, right? Like I said, my professor is a mentor, probably introduced me to the field and helped me build a career in that field. But at the same time, like I would say, my husband is a mentor for my life skills, right? How to run my day-to-day life. And I have had many good managers, luckily. I'm grateful for that, who have been my mentors, helping me take the right decisions. And just to give an example, right? Maybe 10 years ago, I was thinking I'll probably be an individual contributor and I would I would want to be just a techie and not manage people. So at that point, my manager, who I consider as my another mentor, kind of told me this, that, yeah, you could be great as an individual contributor. Right now, there is a need, for someone to lead the team. When you lead the team, you have many more brains and many more hands to achieve, even much larger impact than you would have individually been able to achieve to. So don't look at, people management as a headache. Many times people think like that, but look at it as that power to do much more as an individual, right? And he nudged me into this, and today I'm so grateful that I did take that decision, because I think that's what motivates me every day to go back to work is my team, right? The interactions with the team and how much we can achieve together as a team. So I think right decisions made at key points in life, it has always been through right mentorship.
Mentorship. So great. And since we're talking about teams, I would want to know, how do you create a good working team environment? I would ask you.
First and foremost, I think each member in the team brings something different to the table. Not everyone is the same, right? So as long as the experience within the team is tailored to the motivation of that person, is when you will also get that reverse energy of being wanting to contribute to the team. So I think a lot of time needs to be spent one-on-one with the team members, understanding their personality, their motivation, what they bring to the table, so that you are able to create that network in your head as to, how can this be a good team together? What is the strength of each person? How can they complement each other and be a good team force? For that, the leader needs to have the deep understanding of the personalities of the team members. Second, very important thing is the camaraderie, right? Some level of friendship or care for each other, to have each other's back. I think that can only be built if you build relationships beyond just the project or very tactical operational stuff we discuss. So how do we create those opportunities for the team members also to know each other, interact and be there for each other? Third, I think, is as long as we can clearly lay down the principles by which we live as a team, right? That needs to be very clearly even written out, so that it is clear what is expected out of each team member, and you can hold each other accountable for the same. So we as a team have laid down like 10 principles that we will live by, right? And that has helped bring us together, and actually that being one of the driving force for us to contribute together.
Any of the principles that you can share with us?
There's one principle which is more to, how we work, which is the end customer or the end user is pivotal. Models that you build are just tools, right? You have to build for the end customer is one of the principles.
Yes.
The second principle is we trust each other and we'll have each other's back is another principle. So there are others, but some focusing on the interactions within the team and some focusing on how we work as a team.
Okay, great. So Goda, amazing journey, professional journey that you have seen, right? And you have also seen how, data science has also evolved with time, especially in the Indian ecosystem, right? So how well do you think the Indian ecosystem has adopted to data science? And what are some of the areas or, which are emerging within data science?
I think even before data science, I think one of the key things that most companies have started focusing on and should focus on is the data strategy itself, right?
Okay.
How do you collect the data, first of all, and how do you build products that are not just meant to collect data, but give an end user a good experience while you're collecting that data, right? Just to give a small example, right? If you take mobility as an example, people want to go from place A to place B, right? Are you really asking where do you want to go? And in case you're not able to fulfill that request, you still have the data that this is where people wanted to go to, and this is how the demand looks like. And hence, we need to position our supply accordingly, right? The science problem will come once you have collected the right data. But in terms of applying the science itself, over the last decade, there is a huge amount of progress multiple companies have made, especially because there is a growth of B2C companies which have come up in large numbers. And given the Indian population, there is so much that you collect and know about your end customers to build better products, right? That said, we need to separate the hype from the reality a bit.
Okay.
Because data science, artificial intelligence also comes with a lot of hype and may set wrong expectations where you're imagining that I'll get a data scientist on board and it will do magic in 3 months. That's a wrong expectation to have, and you're actually setting it up for failure if you're having that expectation. It involves a lot of hard work, lot of setting the right expectation, patience, and nurturing for it to actually give you that impact, right?
Okay.
Hiring in the right sequence, choosing the right problems to solve, which will have major impact. And then comes the execution. I think a lot needs to be done before you apply data science
before the
itself.
practical implementation.
Correct.
Okay. A lot more thought that needs to go in that entire effort. So I think if we look at the academic research as well, right? So many things are just happening in the academics research just to gain that knowledge, right? And then, when things come to the practical implementation, then there's a difference.
Correct.
Right? Because I think that's the time when you get hit by the reality. Okay, is it something which is going to work or which is not going to work? What are the challenges which are there in my environment, right?
I think the academic side a lot of times struggles to get a lot of data to prove at scale or do things at scale. And I think organizations which have a lot of data at scale have the problem of time crunch to be able to really solve it rigorously. There is a need for partnerships and collaborations to bridge that part of the gap so that these two tracks can go in parallel.
Okay. And also, Goda, if we look at the data science, there are so many use cases, right? And these use cases, they tend to differ from a B2B setup versus a B2C setup. So what are some of those differentiations that you can talk about from a B2B versus a B2B setup?
I think primary is your end user itself is different because in a B2B setup, you're solving the problem for the business user of the B2B and they might be solving their problem for the end customer. So your primary and important thing is to understand this intermediate user first and solve the problem. Just to give an example, Sabre was a B2B business, right? So if I'm building a forecasting or an optimization model that is telling what price you should set on a particular day, I need to be able to give a lot of explainability around it for that airline employee who is looking at it and trying to make sense. And their responsibility is to make sure, it is communicated and messaged right to their end user, right? So there is that part of who is the end user varies in B2B versus B2C. Second is how much control you have on the data strategy itself is very different because when you're in a B2B setup, you have to solve the problem within the realms and constraints of whatever data that business is able to collect and how their products are built around collecting that data. Whereas in a B2C setup, there is a lot more freedom to design your products in a way which is achieving that balance between data strategy and experience.
Okay.
Right. So that makes a huge difference in terms of your ability to solve the problem well.
Okay. And, since like you also mentioned, the users are different, right? Let's say, we are looking at the B2C world, right? So how do you focus on end users' needs while applying the data science?
I think we need to first, any time we are solving a problem, the first question to ask is, what is it we are solving for the end user? Just to give an example, when you order on Swiggy, right, you see a track screen after ordering to see how long will it take for my order to come in, right? What's the problem you're trying to solve there? You're trying to give the end customer some predictability and some setting expectation that you're doing as to when my order will come. Now, whatever data science model is powering that, the key problem is not to react to every signal you're getting from on ground and jump up and down, right?
Okay.
If you do that, then you're only increasing the blood pressure, not solving the problem of the end customer. Whereas your key goal is to give that, set the expectation in a smooth manner that gives that comfort to the customer, right? That's the problem you're solving. Similarly, I think it's not only data science, a lot of interaction with the user experience, the UI design and the UX design aspect. Let's say, to give an example, when you're trying to call a cab, right? And we are trying to find a rider for you. In the backend, you're running a fantastic algorithm to find the best driver that is there. But what is the messaging you're doing on the app when you're doing that in the background, right? If you're just showing one buffering kind of an icon, the customer might think, oh, it's not working. Probably my app is hanging and just drop off.
Yes.
Right? But in case you're messaging and saying, I'm trying to find a driver for you and probably the driver is so far, give us a few more seconds to find the best driver. A lot can be done to engage the user while your algorithms are running in the backend. Both of these need to go hand in hand. Otherwise, you're not going to achieve or solve that problem or the end impact that you want to have.
Okay. And also, because you have seen this entire journey as well, how do you, how do you make sure, and generally what are the challenges that you face while integrating data science into your work? And how do you manage the teams accordingly?
I think first and foremost, like I said, setting the right expectation with the leaders and the management as to what to expect out of data science. I think that's the first very key step, because having the wrong expectations right then is setting up data science for failure, right? Where to apply, which problems to solve, which has the scope to solve. For example, there could be a lot of problems which you could probably solve in a much more simplistic manner where you don't need a machine learning model, right? If you pick that problem and say, I'll apply a machine learning model there, and it's not even beating base benchmark, just the baseline, then it erodes some trust on what data science can do for you. Whereas if you pick a problem, typically problems that are very multidimensional in nature, where human brain stops working once you go beyond 3 dimensions, probably 4, right? If there are so many factors to consider, or it's happening at that rapid speed that no human can make decisions at that scale and that speed, that is where I think data science plays majority of the role to beat what humans can do, right? And those are the problems you need to pick and solve so that you see that impact, you see that effect it can have on the business. And once that trust is built, it gets very seamlessly integrated with every business decision where people start seeing where we should leverage data science.
We are talking about the applications of data science, right? And, currently, if I talk about today's world, the most buzzing topic out there is artificial intelligence, and especially, with Gen AI, every company is looking to incorporate, Gen AI, right? There are some companies who are maybe just using it, but there are some companies who are actually making impact because of that, right? So, if I just look at, let's say, data science and AI, what is the journey that, that these two have seen? Because I think the models are much more intelligent now. So how the journey has been for the data science along with AI? And how do you foresee, what are some of the trends which are upcoming?
Got it. I think if we see a few years ago, data science was probably used more to automate human decisions to be much better and much faster. but they were not yet human-like, right? What generative AI has done is it has given the machines a capability to be human-like. By that, what I mean is you are able to see things, recognize things, the thing that has happened on the computer vision side, or you're able to generate language like humans, right? So that's what I think is has surprised a lot of people who believed this might not be possible, and that has led to that buzz around generative AI. That said, I think at the end of the day, all of these are still tools, right? Generative AI technologies are also tools in our hands. So it needs a level of caution and cognizance to think where to apply it and where not to apply it, right? And as long as we know how to effectively use those tools, it is making all of us much more productive to focus on much more creative and complex challenges to solve, right? So there, I think now data science, artificial intelligence, all are different terms. Ultimately, you're making machines recognize patterns in data and behave in a certain way, right? So there is definitely a hope and positivity to say it will only help make all our lives much more productive, easier, and help us focus on even more challenging problems to solve, even more creative stuff to do.
You just mentioned about the productivity over here, right? So how AI is actually impacting the productivity, and how do you keep a check on it within your teams, let's say?
So I think a bunch of companies have adopted, all the co-pilots in terms of assisting, development and making it faster. There's a bunch of developments that have happened where now even to do analytics or, query the data and be able to make sense of the data, you can do that in natural language, ask questions, get answers, which will help you make decisions much faster. Earlier, probably you will have to wait for someone to pull that data for you, summarize it for you. Now, all of that is happening in minutes. You can generate presentations in seconds, right? So I think a lot of work that probably was more repetitive and used to take longer, even when you knew exactly what to do, you used to take some time to do it, has become matter of seconds and minutes, which means now you're also focusing much more energy on, how should we design this whole thing? Is this the right problem to solve? Which methodology to apply and solve this? What decisions to take? So you are focusing your energy where you should ideally focus it in some way.
And are there any specific AI tools that you are using?
A bunch of, I think it keeps changing day over day, right? So definitely, I think the favorite programming language for data scientists, you still program in Python, you use Spark, and especially on generative AI tools, copilots, we have tried and we have seen it's helping, right? Sometimes you know exactly what the algorithm needs to do. You just write it in natural language and you get the code. It's magic when that happens. So, yeah, so many more tools. I would say it's changing day by day, no one name to.
And also, when we are talking about data science, we are talking about the patterns, right? And these models, they study the data, right, over a period of time, and then they come up with the patterns. Now, let's say, if I talk about the real-time decision making, right, how it is actually helping the companies or maybe individuals to with the real-time decision making with the use of data and AI?
I think when it comes to real-time decision making, especially, organizations who are doing it at scale, right? Swiggy is one of the companies where every second there is an order and you need to decide, who to give it to, for example, right?
Okay.
So at that scale, decision making cannot be done by humans. It has to be done by machines. Now, where data science helps is how can you make that decision more intelligently, more efficiently, and achieve the goals of all sides. Like, for example, if you're a three-sided marketplace, every side of the marketplace need to benefit out of that one interaction that's happening, right?
What is a three-sided marketplace?
So, for example, for a food delivery business, your restaurant, your delivery partner, your customers are the three sides of the marketplace, right? So every side should benefit out of that one transaction that's happening. So how do you achieve the goals for each of these is a decision that you need to make in real time, day in and day out. So that's where I think data science is helping making those decisions very effectively.
So, Goda, we were talking about real-time decision making, right? But behind this real-time decision making, it's the machines which are getting to decide. So, how exactly does that happen?
So at the end of the day, machines also need information to make decisions, right? Like humans. But a lot of this information actually comes from, machine learning models like deep neural networks. So just to give an example, when a person is coming on to the app and deciding what do I want to eat, right? What do I show to the person, right? It has to be catering to the person's historic interests. Probably what dishes they have ordered, what they have liked. So at an individual level, we have to understand the dish, we have to understand the user's preferences. So all this data of historical interactions, you can think of it like, patterns that exist there. And like deep neural networks can recognize those patterns, build more complex features. Like, for example, if I have to understand a dish has so many dimensions. There is a cuisine, there is a preparation style, there is a portion size, whether it belongs to starter or main course or dessert. Each of these are like features or attributes of that dish. And you need to understand that to represent there are millions of dishes. Now, for a given user, how do I represent all that as numbers that machines can understand, right?
So, Goda, sorry to interrupt you, but what is a neural network?
Okay. So neural networks are machine learning models that are inspired by how human brain works.
Okay.
So we have a lot of neurons in our brain which are connected to each other that helps make sense of information. So neural networks like pass data from one neuron to other neuron, and each neuron is processing and making sense of it and passing on that information to the other neuron, and that forms a network, right? So that's how machines learn like humans to make sense of the data and the patterns.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So in order to show what the user may be interested in, so we learn representations of the dishes. We learn representations for users' taste as to what they like, what they don't like, and try to rank it using machine learning models in real time. So when you open the app, what you see will be very different from when I open the app, right? So be able to personalize it at that level is how machines are making those real-time decisions. Another example is when we have to decide which delivery executive needs to pick up the order. There are a bunch of factors there as to how long will it take to prepare the dish, right? How far is the delivery executive, and hence how long will it take to travel? Each of these are like predictions. They haven't already happened. They're going to happen in future. So you're predicting how long the preparation is going to take. You're predicting how long the travel is going to take. Each of these are again, neural network models which are predicting that.
Okay.
And the machine is receiving all this information and then applying the logic that, who is the best one to deliver this particular order. Right. So
there's a lot of data science which is going on, behind this, one service that we just simply look at, right? So, Goda, if someone is wanting to make a career in data science, what are the areas or what are the things that they should focus on?
I think data science is a culmination of a bunch of fields, if we think about it, right? There is mathematics, there is statistics, there is optimization, there is computer science, there is graph theory, bunch of things that we learn in different domains. Now we are seeing more, programs which are offering data science as a degree, but otherwise, usually it was people from each of these different fields culminating and entering data science and figuring out the other parts which you're not an expert of. So I would say very strong fundamentals in math, stats, linear algebra, at least the math area. Very good programming skills, because at the end of the day, how productive you are and how quickly you can make sense of the data depends on how quickly you can code. So good programming skills is a focus area. And the most important thing, which is a little under focused on, is the ability to tell story with data, right? Because at the end of the day, all your stakeholders who you are trying to convince to apply data science are humans. And humans always understand stories better than data, right? So are you able to tell a story putting together data is a skill that I feel each data scientist needs to focus on and needs to develop, where you can help people take the right decisions, where to apply it, where not to apply it, and measure the impact, right? And focus on first principles. Every time you're solving a problem, ask the so what question. So what? Like, if I solve this problem, what is it going to achieve?
Okay.
Than just getting excited about, oh, I get to build this
thing.
ML model and apply this library and this framework. Ask the so what of the problem that you're solving. I think these skills, if put together, will form a good data scientist, I feel.
There's an interesting, topic that you had mentioned, the storytelling piece over here. So, how does someone become better in storytelling?
One is definitely experience. You tell a story, it works, doesn't work, you learn from that. There are two aspects, at least I have picked up over the years. One is what we call as anecdata, which is how do you anecdotally explain data, right? I might be talking about, let's say I am measuring a particular metric, like how many orders we are getting. Let's say I'm talking about that metric, right? But if I tell the same thing to you as, let's say 1 in every 10 people ordered biryani, that stays with you versus me saying there are X million orders of biryani in a day, right? Being able to anecdotally communicate the same data point is one part. Second is being able to visually communicate with data, right? Rather than showing just numbers all over the place, how can you visually show it? Like, some could be spatial data, so show it as a map.
Okay.
Some could be trends, so show it as a line. Use the aspects of colors, visually plotting different things and being able to tell the same thing. I think people register it much better as a story, as a visual. I think, Drishyam also made the same point, right? Visually, you will hear it very well. And also as anecdotes, what you experience, if you can, link it to data, these three things like stay a lot more with people.
Okay. So data storytelling is very important, and also how you are showcasing the data, maybe in terms of graphs or tables, charts, right? And then it also, I think, helps in ensuring that the other person is also interpreting the data in the right manner.
Correct.
Right? Because I think different people can interpret the data in a different manner, but if it is shown in a very, I would say, structured and a defined way, then it definitely helps with the same interpretation to each and everyone.
Bringing everyone on the same page.
On the same page. And, you have seen such a great, journey, professional journey of 17 years, worked with multiple leaders, worked in different companies. Is there any specific story or incident that you can share with us that actually helped you in excel in your field?
There is one incident that actually taught me ask for help when required, right?
Okay.
So I think between men and women, I feel the only difference is maternity, right? We talk about a lot other things like social conditioning, which is a lot more within our control, right? But this is one area which is like nature, right? The difference. And usually in that phase, when you get back to work, there is a period where there is a feeling of catching up. There is a feel of guilt. There's a feel of self-doubt, a lot to manage. I think there's a lot that can be achieved if that ramp-up period it's a gradual ramp than a sudden switch on that now your maternity leave is over and tomorrow you have to be back in full shape and form. Right? So when I was going through that phase, I did approach the leader of the site where I was working. And I did ask for help saying, I'm not able to give my 100%. So I will be less guilty if you can just pay me 50% and I work 50% for some time.
Okay.
Right? At that point, there was no policy, but I'm grateful that he enabled that. And later it became a policy after a couple of years. But I think when you're asking for that help, many times others might not realize, but you're making them realize, and then the ecosystem starts supporting you. You need to ask. Of course, there is a point that before asking, you need to deserve that. So there is a lot of hard work that goes before you ask for help.
Before you ask for
But asking for help is something I think I learned
something
at that point.
important. Yes. And over the years, do you believe that the ecosystem has also become more supportive, especially towards women?
Yeah, there is a lot of change that I've seen. Just like I said, the policy wasn't there at that point, but it came a couple of years later. So there is a lot more recognition of that phase, how to make that ramp up slower. I think even we extended the duration of the maternity leave as well. Many companies. Now there is paternity leave as well that has come, which means fathers are also, spending that time supporting, which makes that period even more helpful, right? Other than that, I feel there are a lot of opportunities now. I saw a couple of startups in the space to help people come back to work because a lot of dropout happens during that period. So how do you come back to work? How do you upskill yourself, right? So bunch of resources to upskill yourself even remotely. I think remote working has helped that happen from home.
Yeah.
So if you have the talent and skill, there are a lot of avenues right now to utilize your time better, build a career, ramp yourself up gradually, and get back to work. I think that's a big change that has happened
That has happened.
in the ecosystem.
Okay. One personal question I would want to ask you: did you always wanted to become a data scientist?
When I was a child, I don't think data science existed. So I could not have dreamt of becoming a data scientist. I actually wanted to always become an actress, right? I used to dance in front of the TV. I used to enact and, be on stage in school. So I did enjoy that creative side of me a lot. I think data science, like I said, happened by accident and I started enjoying it. And also that bit of, I think, if you're in something, give 100% to it is kind of how I approach things. So yeah, I didn't want to become a data scientist. Of course, I'm living my creative dream in a different way now. Actually, we as a family, like my husband, myself, and my daughter, when we go on our vacations, have this penchant of visiting all the spots where some of the Bollywood movies were shot.
Okay.
We recreate those scenes. My daughter is the cinematographer and I'm the editor and actress in that. So we do that and I'm living that dream differently. But yeah, a balance between the creative, the left and the right brain, I think.
That's great. And I think that's what, keeps you excited about life as well, right? Though sometimes, and I think this is something that happens with most of the people. While growing up, you would have some different dreams, right? I would want to be I remember at that time, I wanted to become a chef. And once I watched this episode of Hell's Kitchen, and I was just, petrified after that, okay, working under Gordon Ramsay. And that time I did not know that he was such a, big celebrity in the, cooking in the chef world. But yeah, that did not
So maybe
happen.
it would have been the chef circle than the chief circle.
Yeah, maybe, But yeah, I think the way things worked out for me, I'm very happy with them. But yeah, this is something that happens with most of the people. And, the way you are getting to live it, especially with your family and your daughter, I think it's a wonderful way.
Right.
To
And my daughter dreams, she's a child now, she's 13-year-old. So she dreams of becoming a designer and she wants to design stuff and not limited to just spaces or interiors. She feels a lot of things we see in our daily lives need more focused designing. So she wants to get into design is what she tells me. That's a dream right now.
Okay.
Don't know what will happen when she grows up.
That's great. I think one more question related to this. Do you think, the people, so let's say, you have been into data science, there are other people, who would be in engineering and product. Sometimes, this kind of pressure also comes from the parents that, because I am an engineer, I'm into this, then my kid should also go in this field. Do you think that comes?
It used to come probably in my generation, but I think as much I've seen the youngsters and I get to see my daughter as well. Now they are much more liberated, more exposure, and I think your peer circle is what is influencing what you dream of more than your parents.
Than your parents.
Right? So that way I feel they'll make much better decisions than my generation at least.
Okay. And Koda, just to end this episode, though I'm loving talking to you here, but what is that one piece of advice that you would want to share with us today?
I would say stay curious because if you're curious, you will go into depths of whatever it is that you're doing. Doesn't matter if it's a STEM field or creative field. You will give your 100%, you will go to the depth of it. And that's where I think the confidence comes to that you can excel. And then you will do well whatever you're doing, right? So I think stay curious is what I would say.
That's great. That's a lovely piece of advice. And thank you so much, Koda, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I just loved this chat.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you. And I think we explored various aspects as well, not just about the data science, but, on the leadership side as well. How do you generally work with, work with the people, right? And I think this personal side is also something that, because, what people think that, okay, this person is into a leadership position. I don't know, how this person is in the real life. But I think getting those, getting to know you from a personal aspect, I think this is also something that a lot of people would be able to relate to it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
As we end our conversation with Koda, we have learned about her amazing work in tech and how she's helping women in the industry. Share it with someone who may find it useful. Till then, I'm your host, Ruby, signing off. Until our next episode, keep exploring the past, discussing the present, and preparing for the future.